Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser, and for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. I'm pleased to welcome in Matt Fox. You may know Matt because he has been in one of the most beloved hardcore bands in not just Florida, but they have grown way larger than just that. Shai Hulud. He's also done a lot of other things over the years that we're going to be getting into, especially a lot of the early Florida stuff. But Matt is here to tell his story. Welcome in, Matt. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I love your podcast.
I appreciate that. Well, it's great to have you finally here to share and tell everyone a lot of the history of yourself. And I know you're no stranger to podcast, but this is going to be something where we're going to really take that deep dive into all things Florida.
I love all things Florida. I just hope my memory accommodates. We'll see.
We'll see how things go. But we are going to time travel a bit and go through some of your history and what have you. But before we get to all that, how are things for you in the current time?
Oh, great. Shai Hulud has reunited with, I guess, technically our third singer, and we just got back from Europe. We were there for 3 weeks, and then we did 10 days on the West Coast and 10 days on the East Coast. Didn't make it down to South Florida, but we're planning that hopefully for this year. So everything's great. I'm happy, healthy as it can be, and yeah, no complaints.
Excellent. Well, it's so wonderful to hear you're still at it, doing your thing after all these years. What are we talking?
Sure.
30 plus years at this point?
Geez, well, my math is really bad, but we started technically in 1995. So, yeah, I think it's a little over 30 years, huh?
Wow. Yeah, it really is. So we're going to take that trip and go back even further than Shai Hulud.
Oh, wow.
So let's go back to your earliest beginnings. Now, I know you weren't born in Florida. You're a New York guy initially, right?
Yeah.
So talk about your earliest beginnings and then how you got to Florida.
Well, I was born in Smithtown, New York, which I think is near or on Long Island. And until I was 5, I lived in a little town called Little Neck, New York. Yeah, and I don't recall anything musical happening not until after 5. My mother didn't really listen to music. I don't remember music ever playing as a kid. The only music that ever came from our house came from me when I started really getting into it.
So when you got to Florida, what part and what year about was it?
What part? I got there in 1978. Like I said, when I was 5, I was born in 73. So, you asked another question that I didn't get to. I'll just briefly. My mom was recently divorced, and my grandpa got sick. So grandma and grandpa decided to move from New York all the way down to South Florida. Pompano Beach, particularly, which is where I really grew up. Just saying Pompano gives me chills. I love Pompano. So yeah, that's why we moved back down. And I think shortly thereafter, I saw on television probably Phantom of the Park, the movie, the Kiss movie. And that is probably what got me started being interested in music. I don't even know that I really paid attention to Kiss's music, but I was so enamored by the makeup and the whole set. And later on, when I was in college, I was a theater major, so it kind of makes sense. But shortly, I think I was in kindergarten, and we were playing with bricks, and I found 2 big bricks, and I gave one to my friend, and I said, "I'll be Gene Simmons, you be Paul Stanley." So Kiss whether or not I was into the music, Kiss made a huge initial impact on me.
Did you ever have any Halloweens where you dressed up as one of the members of Kiss?
I don't know if it was Halloween, but I do have a picture that I'll send to you of me as the Catman, Peter Criss.
Very cool. So you went through getting into Kiss at a very early age, maybe not necessarily the music
sure,
first and foremost, but just the way that they looked, the costumes and
loved it,
makeup and all of that,
and the fact that they were playing music.
Right, they were.
You know, I loved that. Whether or not I actually paid attention to the music at that age, I don't know.
At what age did you wind up having your first concert experience?
Oh, geez, pretty late. I think most people started going to shows earlier than I did. I think it was in 1988, so I must have been 15. As far as I was concerned, it was a Metallica show. However, it was Metallica on the Monsters of Rock tour with Kingdom Come, Metallica, Dokken, Scorpions, and then headlining was Van Halen. But like I said, as far as I was concerned, it was a Metallica show. So that was my first.
Where was that?
Geez, I think I'm pretty sure it was in Miami. Sometimes I misremember and say Orlando, but I'm pretty sure it was Miami. I'd have to look it up to confirm.
Sure. Wow. So that was the first concert that you went to, 15 years old.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. That was the first.
Who took you?
Well, I was in, my friends and I started a metal band. We were in a metal band that we called Evilalive, going back to Kiss. We got the name. We were sitting up trying to come up with names. I came up with the name Fire Knife, which nobody liked. And behind me was Kiss's Alive upside down. So I looked and I just said Alive backwards. I said, how about Evilla? And my friend said no. And I said, how about Evilalive? So it wasn't Evil Alive. It was Evilalive. And it came from Kiss's Alive album. So we had this metal band. We had songs called... we had one song called Hell, It's All in the Wrist, Chronic Depression. You know, it sounds like your standard 15-year-old fare.
Sure.
You know, if you're into metal. So anyway, my friends that were in that band with me at that time were my friend Joe Keat, who later went on to play in Tension. I'm sure you know Tension. And and another friend who I kind of grew up with, a guy named Paul Politz. So it was Joe Keat's uncle, if I remember correctly, his Uncle Sal. We all piled into like an SUV type thing and headed to Miami to go see Metallica. The whole I should say, I was diehard Metallica, did not care about Kingdom Come, didn't like Dokken, was just a little too glammy for me. Scorpions were cool and Van Halen was cool. But for me, it was a Metallica show. However, the whole show, except for Kingdom Come, was great. Even Dokken I didn't mind live. It's the only time I've ever seen Dokken. Right. But yeah, so me, Joe, Paul, and Uncle Sal drove us all to the show. I could not. Here's something that I don't know that I've ever said in a podcast before. I made a promise to myself and probably my friends too. I said, every note, while Metallica is playing a note, I don't care what they're doing, I'm banging my head. So 15-year-old goals. That was my goal, was to bang my head constantly during any sound Metallica made. I did not succeed, and I should say I had summer school the next day that I didn't go to because I had what they call a bangover.
Wow. That's wild. So
true story.
Where'd you go to school? High school?
High school was Deerfield High. You know, it was the closest school to where I was in unincorporated Pompano. And my middle school, when I was when I went to middle school. I was at Crystal Lake, I think is in Pompano, if you know Crystal Lake.
I do.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't hang out with the metalheads too much because they all smoked, and I've always been allergic to cigarettes. So
who was your crowd at that time?
Probably the theater kids. I was the only things I cared about in high school were metal and theater. Those were my two things. I don't know if you can see, I'm wearing a Little Shop of Horror shirt.
Yeah. Classic.
So, metal and theater were my two big interests.
Nice. Interesting.
Yep.
So as you were getting a little bit older, you mentioned again, first concert, 15 years old. At what point did you start to uncover and learn more about other local bands, not just in the greater Fort Lauderdale area, but just in other parts of South Florida?
Well, I'm trying to think. I remember I wasn't into the band, no disrespect, but I remember Nasty Savage, they put out a record with Metal Blade. So that was at our local record stores. I would see that and I was like, oh, wow, cool. They're from Florida. Then at one point I bought the tape and didn't like it. But so Nasty Savage was an early one. But when my band Evilalive started, when we started playing out, by that time we had changed our name to Unwillful Demise. And that, again, was with Joe Keat of Tension, Paul Politz, and my friend Scott Hanslick. So we were in Unwillful Demise, and we played our first show at the Treehouse. And I'm pretty sure it was with Malicious Damage, Malevolent Creation. This is before they got signed, but they were still pretty popular in Florida. And maybe another band that I can't remember. But I would say once we started playing out and realized that there was this world, this scene that you could be a part of, that's where I learned about all the metal bands and hardcore punk bands at that time.
How would you describe that gig that you played there?
I was the whole thing was thrilling. We got to play with Malevolent Creation. None of us were huge fans, but we knew that was like kind of important for us. Wow, we're kind of in the mix now. This is really cool. And we played the set. I remember, we were terrible, of course, because I was the drummer and I was terrible. But I remember thinking we had a great show. This is, a 15-year-old kid thinking they had a great show. Who knows how great it really was. But I remember really enjoying it. And at the end of the night, the promoter gave us $100. So that was like $25 each. I got to play a show. I saw a couple cool bands. I got to meet Pooch from Raped Ape, which was a huge deal to me back then. Still, actually. And then I got $25 in my pocket for playing the show. So it was a great first show for us.
And the way you described Pooch from Rape Ape, who's also been a guest on the podcast as well. What was it about him and Raped Ape that just connected with you?
Well, I just loved their demos. Whatever one I had, I don't even recall. And I knew that they were like a big deal in the scene. And he was so cool. He came right up to me and said, "Hey, you guys were good." Now, mind you, I'm 15. I don't know how old he is now, but he must have been the old age of 18 or maybe even 19. But whatever he was, it seemed like light years away from me. And he was one of the big cool kids as far as I was concerned. And he came up to me and just said, "Yeah, man, you guys were great. I play in a band called Raped Ape." And, I'm thinking, of course I know who Raped Ape is. But I was just really taken aback that now as an adult thinking back, I was taken by his kindness, just coming to introduce himself to some goofy kid, because who knows whether or not he really liked our band, but he was basically giving me a personal invitation into the scene. And I thought that was, again, as an adult, thinking back, I don't know that I would be that. I hope that I've been that cool to other bands. But yeah, he was really cool. I was flying high for at least a week thinking that I met Pooch from Rape Tape.
That's awesome. What a cool story.
Yeah.
And I believe also around the same time, Amboogalard played a lot of shows with Rape Tape. Did you ever have any run-ins with those guys back then?
Yeah, sure. We played, I want to say we played with them twice, but I can't confirm that. I know for a fact we played with Amboogalard, who I also loved. We played with them at the Pompano Deaf Club. Yeah, we played the Deaf Club. It was us, Amboogalard, maybe Malicious Damage, maybe not. I don't know. It seems like we always were playing with Malicious Damage. But yeah, so we played with Amboogalard, and I was already a fan. This is before Dan Fontana started singing. They had another, like, kind of almost like a punk hardcore guy singing. But yeah, I was a big fan. I met Jordy. Jordy was the only one that I really talked to. I don't remember talking to any of the other guys, but I would see Jordy from time to time because he would always work at he would work somewhere in the Coral Square Mall. He once worked at a t-shirt kiosk where I haggled with him to buy a Jimi Hendrix shirt. And
did you get the shirt for the price you wanted?
No, I had to pay full price.
Okay.
But I remember harassing him and begging him, can you do it for like 10? Can you do it for like 12? And I was just some annoying kid. But I felt like I could talk to him because, I kind of knew him. And here's a funny story that I've told before, but this is how where our careers were going. One up, one wherever we are. I can't remember the record store that was in the Coral Square. I want to say it was like Record Town or something. I don't recall what the name of it was, but I saw him in there, and we were friendly with each other. He said, "Hey, Matt. Hey, Jordy." And I said, "What are you getting?" And he had a tape in his hand. It was Faith No More, The Real Thing. Something that did not interest me at all. I wasn't a fan. I didn't like the hit song that was on MTV at that time. And he said, "What did you get?" And I held up Uncle Slam. Do you know who Uncle Slam is?
I don't think so.
It's like a side band or one of the bands in the Suicidal Tendencies crew. Yeah, it was Uncle Slam's Say Uncle. So he had Faith No More and went on to fame, fortune, and superstardom. And I had Uncle Slam Say Uncle. And, I went into Shai Hulud.
Which is still a really good gig.
Maybe. Another mall that was in Pompano and was a little west. It might have been called the Outlet Mall, but there was a big theater there. It was called Fox Pompano, actually. Do you know about Fox Pompano?
If it's off US 1, yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I do.
Okay, at that mall, there was an arcade, there was the movie theater, and there was before they had a cool store, there was like just a regular record store. But then Sid's Records opened up in the Outlet Mall. So we met a lot of people, especially when I got into hardcore. That was a really a great place to meet people. But when I was more of a metal guy, which was up until about like 17, 18, we would hang out in the arcade, and there was this guy there I haven't thought of or talked to, or he just hasn't come up in conversation in over 30 years. A guy who was like a manager at the arcade, his name was Mike DeRocha. He used to walk around with an unlit cigarette, and people would ask him, "Do you want a light?" And then he would take the cigarette out of his mouth and show the words that he had written on it that says, "I don't smoke." So that was Mike DeRocha, and he was older than us. We were probably, like I was saying, maybe 16, maybe a little older at the time, and he was in his 20s. So I remember some people even saying, "Why is this guy in his 20s hanging out with you kids?" But he was just a metalhead. He was a metal guy. And around that time, we started going to metal shows and, hanging out with him.
And just thinking about those places where you would go, kids' houses, friends, what have you, was there music that was being played there too, such as bands? Like were there backyard type shows, garage shows, that kind of thing happening as well?
Not until I was older. I remember being around 18 or 19 and going to my God, I can't even remember who played, but it was probably the first house show that I ever went to. A couple bands had played, and they were like hardcore punk, and that was a scene that I was really interested in, but didn't know anything about. I knew like Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat and things like that, but I didn't know about generally hardcore. So yeah, I was at this party and these hardcore bands played, and I just thought they were awesome. I don't remember the names of any of them, but I was like, holy shit, these guys fucking kill.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then also even older than that, we played a house, like a backyard party where they built a stage. But yeah, when we were just hanging out at 15, 16 years old or so, I don't remember. The only bands that would ever play at someone's house was us. We played a party. I want to say it was a New Year's Eve. Maybe it was a New Year's Eve party, or it was a birthday party at my friend Jen's house. And we were the only band that played. I think this was Evilalive before Unwillful Demise came about. And we didn't have a warehouse yet. This is when we were, still pretty young. But we would go to our friend Scott's house in West Palm Beach. We would drive all the way out there, which at the time seemed like, a huge drive. We would drive to West Palm Beach to practice like in his living room. And sometimes we would practice at my house, but we would have to incur the wrath of my mother. I don't know if you know the song Madman by DRI off Dealing With It.
I do.
Yeah, that big intro? It was essentially the same thing, but with my mother instead of the guy's dad.
That's fantastic. So
yeah,
I imagine before you got to hardcore, but correct me if I'm wrong, did you go into the crossover, like thrash style first, then hardcore, or did you go straight from metal to hardcore?
No, I would say I went definitely crossover, when I was I was heavily into Nuclear Assault, and as far as I'm concerned, that's fairly crossover as it is. Still a big Nuclear Assault fan. And from them, I found out about Stormtroopers of Death, and, from there, Agnostic Front, Cro-Mags, absolutely loved Age of Quarrel. But DRI obviously became a huge one. I think I got into the metal Suicidal probably before I heard the first album. So yeah, I definitely got into all that crossover stuff. But
were you keeping your eyes and ears to when some of these bands were coming to town and touring? Did you get a chance to see any of them early on?
Yeah, I saw. Never got a chance to see DRI as a kid. One show that comes to mind was Destruction, the metal band from Germany, Destruction, was headlining the Cameo with Cro-Mags supporting. And I liked Destruction, but I loved Cro-Mags. So I was really excited. I got to see them. This is right around the time Best Wishes came out, an album I wasn't as much into as I was Age of Quarrel. But yeah, I saw Cro-Mags without John Joseph, Harley on vocals, opening for Destruction at the Cameo.
Wow.
Yeah, probably.
Was that one of your earliest shows at the Cameo?
It wasn't my first show at the Cameo, but it was like in the first 3 or 4 for sure. Cameo was originally my venue. That's my first show. You'll love this story. I had tickets to go see Flotsam and Jetsam supporting King Diamond at the Cameo. And my friend Judah Hutcher, who was like the first guy that had a car, and he took us to all the shows in Miami. He lived, fortunately for me, he lived right across the street, so that was awesome. So I go out, I'm about to head outside, and I see Judah in his car going like this, making a "what's going on" sign, and so I start to go out to his car, and my mother says, "Where do you think you're going?" And I said, "I'm going to see Flotsam and Jetsam and King Diamond." And she said, "Not on a school night, you're not." And I'm looking at Judah, giving me hand signals like, "Let's go, what's going on?" And I looked at Judah, I looked at my mother, I looked at Judah, I looked at my mother, and I said, "Fuck you, Mom." And I went to the show. And that was the last time I ever had a curfew.
Wow. Was there any repercussions when you came home that night?
No. By this point, my mother and I had a really contentious relationship. Like I said, she was the mad woman from the DRI song. So at that point, I don't know if it's because of metal. It may have just have been because I was so tired of being yelled at. But by the time I was 15 or 16, I finally had enough and had the balls to, tell my mom off. And that's what I did. And because of that, I went to go see King Diamond. Wow. Now, fast forward 30 some odd years, when we signed to Metal Blade, I talked to the owner, Brian Slagle, and I said, "Please tell King Diamond that the newest band you signed, the guitar player told his mom to fuck off just so he could go see you play," in like 1988 or 89, whatever it was.
So you had seen other shows at the Cameo, and one of the ones you really called out, though, was that Cro-Mags show. Talk about the crowd. Just what was that like? You're a young kid, right?
Well, yeah, the crowd would be better spoken of if I mentioned probably the best show that I ever saw at the Cameo, which was Slayer, Motorhead, and Overkill. My friend Ray, A.K. Ray, who played Intention, he was at that show, which I didn't find out for like another 15 years or so. But yeah, this show was like crazy, and we were terrified. It was my friend Paul Politz and I. We were upstairs in the balcony, and I want to say Ray, my friend Ray from Tension, remembers this story, and he's told it to me so many times, but I just keep going back to my memory, and my memory is a little fuzzy. But during Slayer, I don't know. This is what my memory is telling me. Don't quote me on this. If anyone's listening and you were at that Slayer, Motorhead, Overkill show, maybe you can get in touch and tell me what exactly happened. But like I said, my friend Paul and I, young 15-year-old kids, terrified of all the people with no hair, and even the people with long hair like us. We were still pretty scared. But we were in the balcony. And I think I don't know if it was during Angel of Death or what song, but Lemmy came out, and I think he put his fingers above his lips like a Hitler mustache, you know, and was doing like a Sieg Heil move. And then we noticed like a group of skinheads, for as far as we were concerned, enthusiastically doing the Sieg Heil thing back to him. And I remember I looked at Paul like absolutely terrified. Paul looked at me absolutely terrified, and he said to me, maybe we should hang up here for a while. And I was, yeah, definitely.
So did you start to tap into any other venues where you were seeing bands besides places like the Cameo?
Well, there was the Treehouse. Treehouse was never scary, though.
How often were you going to the Treehouse?
We went quite a few times. We played there at least 2 or 3 times. I believe we saw Cynic there, you know, once or twice. Probably Malicious Damage 100 times.
What did you think of Cynic back then?
Absolutely loved him, like everybody else. I remember the show that we went and saw them at. They had their first demo, which, if I recall correctly, was called "Reflections of a Dying World." And I bought that, and we listened to it over and over and over again. We absolutely loved Cynic. When, you know, years later, I heard Focus, I remember thinking, this is not the Cynic that I really wanted. But I ended up falling in love with Focus as well. But yeah, Cynic was, they were like the local darlings for sure. So at the Treehouse, I also got to see one of my all-time favorite metal bands from Canada called Dead Brain Cells. I don't know if you know who they are.
I don't think so.
They're commonly known as DBC. It's a band that I'm constantly talking about, even to this day. But, yeah, so we went to the Treehouse a lot. We saw Devastation, Laws Rocket. That all might have been one show. I can't even remember. So many shows there. But, yeah, we went to the Treehouse quite a bit. Like I was saying, the crowds weren't too scary there. The crowds were mostly scary. Like, at the Treehouse, I felt cool. Like, I felt like I belonged. When I went to the Cameo, I really strongly felt I am way out of my element here. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I remember, I think it was at the +5, don't quote me on that, but we went and saw Sheer Terror and Clutch, which was really cool. At the time, I wasn't a Clutch fan. I left right after Sheer Terror. But the funny thing is, Shai Hulud ended up playing with Clutch once, you know, many, many years later, and I actually stayed for them, and I watched their set, and I was completely blown away.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, Clutch is awesome. So I definitely became a fan.
So after things wrapped up with Unwillful Demise,
I got kicked out.
Why did you get kicked out?
Because I was an obnoxious kid. Some people might say I'm an obnoxious adult, but I was a really rotten, horrible kid. And I can only imagine how impossible I was to be in a band with, especially back then. So they moved on. They got a friend of mine named Eric Leon, who ended up playing drums for them, and they actually did a professional recording that was pretty cool. It was cool to hear one of the songs that I had a part, you know, in creating, recorded professionally, and I had nothing to do with it. It was on one of those South Florida comps, Unsigned 3, maybe?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, Unwillful Demise is on there without me. But it was better for them because Eric, the guy that they got, was a much better drummer. Great drummer.
Was your attitude changing the more you got into hardcore and punk?
The only way my attitude changed is I definitely got into a period which is completely asinine. I got into a period where I was like, man, you're still listening to Metallica? Man, fuck Slayer. You know, these bands that probably 6 months prior were the most important bands in my life to me. And now at 52 in 2026 still are two of the most important bands in my life. Looking up, I see two Metallica drapes hanging right in front of me. So yeah, I definitely got that punk rock, hardcore, elitist attitude where if it wasn't punk or hardcore, I wasn't interested. But outside of that, I was maturing, and shortly thereafter, I would say by the time I was 20, by the time Shai Hulud started, even probably before, I would say a bit before, like when I was in my early 20s, I had the revelation that some people never have, which is, wow, punk's awesome, hardcore is awesome, and fucking heavy metal rules. And that's, made me into the person that I am today. Those are, just like they say in the Blues Brothers, I listen to both kinds of music, country and Western. I listen to all three kinds of music: punk, metal, and hardcore.
There you go. Trifecta.
That's it. That's all there is. I'm kidding. But, so, I was maturing a bit and learning a lot. When I finally got into hardcore, the band that really... Well, I fell in love with the Bad Brains, I should say. Bad Brains for hardcore is my Metallica for metal. Like, Metallica was the band that changed my life. And in the hardcore world, Bad Brains is the band that changed my life.
Did you see them at the Cameo when they played?
Did not see them at the Cameo. I saw them, I believe it was at the Ambassador. Again, don't quote me on that. My memory's a little shaky. But I saw them without HR. It was when they had that guy Israel from the album Rise. They did that one album without HR. So I got to see them on that tour. But no, unfortunately, there were so many bands that had... So many hardcore bands that were going on at the Cameo, and I just didn't know who they were. Like, I had a friend, I remember telling me that he just saw Youth of Today at the Cameo, and I'm thinking, wow, that sounds really cool, but who the hell are Youth of Today? I just didn't know. But it started with Bad Brains, really, but the first band that, showed me the door of where modern hardcore was Sick of It All. And I bought it on a whim. It was me and the Unwillful Demise guys. I don't remember what record store we were at, but there was like an end cap with this new band, Sick of It All, and I picked it up and I saw Skinheads on it, and I said, I'm buying this. Blood, Sweat, and No Tears. And even though Bad Brains was the big hardcore band for me, the biggest of all time, Sick of It All really opened that door that I didn't even know that it existed. I had an inkling. I know there's this door to this world that I want to be a part of, and Sick of It All showed me that door, and that's when I got into all the hardcore of the time,
right?
Like Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits and all that stuff.
Sure. And a lot of those bands, like Youth of Today, for example, when they came down to South Florida, there were now these local hardcore bands in South Florida who would be opening for them. Did you start to learn more about the hardcore scene in South Florida at that time too?
Yeah. I remember the band Foie. Do you remember Foie? Fun with Alcohol?
Yep.
And I remember seeing the Roids at the Foundation, who I loved.
Was that the first time you were at Foundation in West Palm?
No. The first time I was at Foundation... Oh, I saw that was another one, but that was in my early 20s, right before Shai Hulud started. I used to play drums in the ska punk band Bingo Mutt. So when Bingo Mutt was playing the Foundation all the time, that's where we would go to see. I saw so many bands. I saw Guar at the Foundation. I saw Excel I don't know if you know who Excel is. It's another. Oh, okay.
Sure.
For anyone listening, it's another band in the Venice Beach Suicidal crew. I saw Excel there for there was 6 people there. It was, I mean, an insult to the band because they're so great, but it was great for me. Yeah, the Foundation was a big one. Saw so many of the local bands, the local hardcore bands at the time, like all my friends' bands. God, who's coming to mind? Overshadow, Platform, Roosevelt.
Did you ever see the Believers back then?
Oh, man. Believers was another band. I have, right behind me, I have the Believers Straight Edge Ruler. This is when we did the Real and Restless Fest. I got this there. Can you see it? Awesome band. When I saw it, I had to get it. No, but to answer your question, I had heard of the Believers, and that was one of the bands that I always wanted to hear and just never heard. But I knew they were like one of South Florida's greats as far as hardcore. They were a little before my time. So I only saw them for the first time when Shai Hulud played that fest that I'm talking about, Real and Restless, maybe 10 or so years ago.
Sure. And there's always going to be those moments where there were these bands that existed before you were able to know who they were. But as you get older, have you gone back to rediscover some of the bands from not only that era, but also even further in Florida or South Florida?
Well, have I gone back? Not so much. I should say this. I have more of an appreciation for Load now than I did when I saw them way back when. When I saw them, I wasn't into them at all. But now I listen to their records and I have a real good time with them. So I would say Load, and I can't mention Load without mentioning probably my second favorite punk band from Florida, which is Quit. I've been on a huge Quit kick for the last week. They were a huge band for me. Never met the guys, don't know them, have plenty of friends that know them. But that album they put out, Earlier Thoughts, just was, man, it still is just what a killer record. Why
did it connect with you in that way, you think?
I had just got into the Descendants at that point, and I'm sure Quit would even say Descendants were probably a huge influence. So when I became a Descendants fan, Descendants really were one of the bands that, like Bad Brains, this is just before I heard Sick of It All. They became a really important band, and anything that sounded remotely like the Descendants was definitely going to be up my alley. And what I loved about Earlier Thoughts, and still love about, let's stick with the time. At the time, what I loved about Earlier Thoughts was it was better production. It was, the production on that record is just stellar, fantastic. And I love that the guitars were so metal sounding. Even though I was just getting into punk, it was just like this heavy, melodic, absolutely awesome punk record. So catchy, so hooky. I just made a Facebook post about them the other day because I was just reminiscing, and like I said on my post, unfortunately, Quit is Florida's best kept secret. The whole world should have known about Quit. It's just crazy.
Sure. Did you ever share the stage with those guys?
No. In fact, I only saw them twice. First time I saw them, I stage dove and fell on my face.
Were you known to stage dive like that?
No, it was my absolute first time. I didn't know what I was doing, and as soon as they played my favorite song, which is called "Did You See," I stage dove at the right point. That's all I cared about, is I had to take flight right as the drums come in, and I fell. There was a group of girls that were under me, and they all scattered, and I fell right on my knees and face. But hey, I stage dove at the right time. So no, I was not known for stage diving, and I only moshed once in my life, and that was at a Testament show. I want to say that might have been at Summers. Somebody, if you're listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Testament, Annihilator, and Wrathchild America. But I went into the pit for about, I don't know, 12, 13 seconds. I got knocked down, and the next thing I knew, somebody was standing on my head. And that was, I thought to myself, as the guy is standing on my head, if I get out of this alive, I'm never moshing again. And mark my words, I never did.
And I know you've seen your share of pits over the years, both as a fan going, but also on stage. Just talking about that for a moment, sidebar on pits.
Okay.
What have been some of the craziest that you've seen that come to mind? Both the ones that you were there watching the band play and also playing on stage.
Well, Hatebreed pits are pretty violent. I think you got to have a screw loose to be anywhere near that. I watched all the time. I've seen Hatebreed a million times. All the times I've seen Hatebreed, I was either on stage or very safely in the back. There's absolutely no way I was getting in the pit. Some of the pits at Hellfest, the original Hellfest that was at in Syracuse, the first or second year was Earth Crisis's final show, and I remember that being really intense. And again, I was very much safely in the back, just enjoying the whole set.
Sure.
But yeah, on stage with Hulud, we've seen, we get people that sing along more than mosh usually, which is exactly what we want. But there's been a few shows. I think it was another Hellfest. In 2004, there's some videos on YouTube. You could see people going really crazy and stage diving when they maybe shouldn't have, and you could see me acting like a Jewish grandmother. Like, I take my hand off my guitar and I go like this. I put my hand, for those who are just listening to this, I like when your mom is driving a car and she uses her hand as a seatbelt to protect you. Like, I'm putting my hand out in caution to try to stop people from hurting themselves. But yeah, we've seen pits, and I love the instant gratification of quote unquote moshing. I love when people go crazy. I love when music that I had a part in creating makes somebody go crazy. But for me, the most emotional aspect of playing hardcore shows is getting even just 20 kids, if you're lucky, more, up front, all screaming along to the lyrics with their fingers in the air. That's what gets me more than moshing. But yes, we have seen our fair share of hectic pits.
And no more stage diving. You retired after that one and done.
My one stage dive for Quit, and my one mosh for Testament. That's it.
That's it.
And I should mention, I keep saying Summers. I don't know if it was Summers, but I saw right before they got a full band, the alternative kind of punk adjacent band, They Might Be Giants. Some girl stage dove on me, and I didn't know what was happening. I just saw this figure come at me, and all of a sudden I put my hands up and I look, and I'm holding her by her chest. She just happened to land there, and that was another stage diving incident that I had, which was interesting to say the least.
That really bookended that whole experience there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was so. Those are my three experiences that made me never want to go into a pit again.
Can't blame you. So I want to go back to some of the music, because I know you mentioned Bingo Mutt when we were talking about Foundation.
Yep.
There were some other bands, though, that were in between that period when you were in Bingo Mutt.
Yeah, sure.
So I believe one of them was Planet X, if I'm...
Oh, yeah. Planet X was me, Mike Hurley from Tension, the vocalist. He was the singer of Planet X. Josh Colbert, who went on to be the main writer in Strong Arm and Further Seems Forever. And another South Florida stalwart, Ray Souza, who went on to be in... Also, he played in Tension for a while, but he went on to be in a band called Grass Patch.
Sure. Was this their first band, as far as you know, too?
I don't know about Ray. I think it was Josh's first band. It may have been Mike's first band, too. Because Josh was just a freshman in high school, and I had just graduated high school. So, yeah, but it was us four. We played Planet X, and Planet X kind of broke up and went off into two directions, a Christian direction and a secular direction. And that's why, well, ultimately, that's why there is a Strong Arm and a Shai Hulud. But before Strong Arm and Shai Hulud, there was Endure, which was a guy named Jamie on drums, Josh Colbert on guitar, Nick Dominguez, who went into Strong Arm and Further on guitar, and Mike Hurley, again, before Tension, was singing. And the Murrychesstoes, or I should say the Fabulous Murrychesstoes, we got our name because where we used to practice at Planet X was at Josh's house, and Josh was Christian. His mother was, very religious, and there were children's blocks that spelled out Merry Christmas. And one time our bass player Ray, he instead of Merry Christmas, he made it say Murrychesstoe with these children's blocks. And we said, if we ever start another band, it's going to be called the Murrychesstoes. And that's exactly what we did. And that was the secular version of Planet X. That's how we branched off. When I joined Bingo Mutt, Murrychesstoes had ended pretty much.
I see. Did any other venues pop up that you were playing that you had never played before?
Well, I was like a fill-in drummer for everybody for a while, and around that time, I played Washington Square with the Shrooms. I'm sure you know of the Shrooms.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, yeah, I filled in on drums at Washington Square opening for Rancid.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a cool show.
Was that your first time at Washington Square?
Yeah, it was my first time. I remember Green Day playing the Washington Square, but I was not a Green Day fan, so I didn't go. I'd heard of the Washington Square, but the only time that I remember being there was with the Shrooms on drums.
Did you know guys like Rabbi in the scene who was bringing in some of these bands and promoting a lot of those shows?
I met Rabbi when I was in Murrychesstoes, and I couldn't believe, because I had heard the name around, if you want a show, you talk to Rabbi. And I remember meeting him in the parking lot of some venue and being kind of blown away that I'm actually talking to Rabbi. And I said, hey, will you give my band a show? He says, yeah, if your band's good. But I don't know that we ever really had a relationship with him until like around the time Shai Hulud started.
I see.
So I knew of him when he was younger, like when he was booking like Quit and Load and all those bands. But I don't think that we ever worked with him until quite a few years later.
And during the same time, he was also booking shows at places like the Thrash Can.
Oh, Thrash Can. Okay. I don't know if he...
The Junkyard was another one. Did you ever
Junkyard?
see shows there?
Yeah, I saw at the Junkyard is where I met Ray Souza. We didn't know each other, and we met in line going to see Biohazard and The Exploited. Typo Negative was also supposed to play, but for some reason they canceled that show. Yeah, that was at the Junkyard. The Thrash Can, I remember. I don't recall who I saw there. But yeah, there were so many venues. And I loved them all. But Cameo, nothing will ever beat the Cameo for me, because I was so young, and as much as I hated the fear back then, now I just love the fact that I was so scared. What a cool place.
What was your last show at the Cameo?
Last show at the Cameo, I saw Sacred Reich and Atrophy there. After that, I don't quote me on which came last, but one of the last shows that I saw there was it was Dark Angel, Death Angel, and Death. Great show.
And that was Florida's Death, right?
Yeah, with Chuck Schuldiner.
What did you think of those guys, considering they're one of the pioneers of the Florida death metal scene?
Love them. When I first heard them, I thought they were just a thrash band. You know, I heard the first Death I heard was their first album, Scream Bloody Gore. I had a friend named Jason Tusserone. That's a name that I haven't thought of in a long time. And he was always finding new stuff. He turned me on to a lot of bands. He got me into Death. He got me into Wasted Youth. He got me into the Misfits. He got me into Manowar and Motorhead, actually, too. So anyway, this guy Jason, I went to his house. He lived only a couple blocks away. And he says, you got to hear this new thing that I got. And it was Scream Bloody Gore. And I was completely blown away. I thought it was just awesome. Absolutely loved it. And then my friend, that was probably in 86. And then my friend Paul Politz, who I've spoken about, one day we went to his house and he says, I've got this awesome new band. And I said, what is it? Let's hear it. You know, because at that time I was eager and I wanted to consume everything. And he said, the band is Death Leprosy. And I thought he was talking about like a Def Leppard parody band. Death Leprosy was, you know, it sounded like it was making fun of Def Leppard. But then I said, I've never heard it. Let me see it. So he brought the tape out, and it was Leprosy, the second album by Death. I said, I know these guys. This is Death. And it was on that tour that we got to see Dark Angel, Death Angel, and Death. To my right, I have a little Death mouse pad hanging on my wall.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you start to go down that rabbit hole even further, looking at who were some of these bands that were recording at the studio called Morris Sound, Obituary, and Morbid Angel? Did you start to dive deeper into that?
No. In fact, quite the opposite. When I got into hardcore, like I said, I wanted to be that elitist punk hardcore kid that metal's just not cool anymore. You know, the guy that thought that. So when I remember I guess the first death metal album may be considered Scream Bloody Gore, but like I was saying, to me it was just a heavier thrash album. But the first album that I ever heard that was really considered death metal was Deicide's first record, which I like now. I don't love it, but I like it. And at the time when that came out, I was completely into hardcore. So I didn't give it much of a chance, and I missed the first wave of death metal. A lot of death metal, I like around 2000, when I was around 27, I said, I wonder if any of these bands are good. So I remember going back and checking out Entombed and Vader and Obituary and Morbid Angel. all the bands that you're talking about that I missed. Some of them I absolutely love. Some I don't care for. Morbid Angel, for some reason, I just can't get into. But I fell in love with Entombed and Obituary. But yeah, I didn't know, because I was into so much hardcore at that time, buying records at Far Out, buying 7 Inches at Far Out, or Yesterday and Today records in Miami. I put metal to the side and didn't know. Even Shai Hulud, one of our first big shows, was with Entombed, and I can't remember the name of the club. It was upstairs somewhere in Fort Lauderdale. Snapcase and Donuts played there.
I believe it was the Prop Room.
You are absolutely correct. Prop Room.
It was upstairs of the theater.
Yes.
Off US 1, I think.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. It's good to have you.
I was there. I was at that show.
The Entombed Hulud show?
Yes.
Oh, well, here's a funny story about that show. I remember...
I have a funny story, too, I'll get into.
Oh, okay, yeah. I want to know. Well, at that show, I'd never heard Entombed before, and we were told that we had to price match. We were selling our shirts for $6. And Entombed was selling theirs for, like, at the time, maybe 25, 30, even back then. I don't know. But whatever it was really, especially at the time, and especially to hardcore kids, really expensive. And I remember thinking, who is this cheesy metal band that's making us match their prices? Entombed? I've never even heard them. Who are now, of course, one of my favorites. But that's because, again, I got so deep into hardcore that I just paid no attention to the metal of the time. Tell me your story.
It's funny how that works out, though. Like, some of the bands you saw way back when, then later on they become one of your favorites.
Oh, I absolutely love Entombed.
Yeah. So my quick story on that was right before that show. I'd been to the Prop Room before to see other bands, so I knew of it. I lived in Coral Springs, and I would go to the Coral Springs movie theater often with friends. And at the time, Chad Gilbert was working at the concession.
Sure, I remember. Sure.
And I was wearing something and had a band. I don't remember what band it was. And Chad made a comment about what I was wearing, and he said, I'm in a band. And he said, I'm in this band called Shai Hulud. And we're playing at a show, and that was the show, the one with Entombed. He actually gave me a flyer. Nice.
Oh, wow.
There at the counter. And he told me that he sang for the band. And I couldn't put that. He told me like they were a heavier band. I didn't really know what that meant at that time. I knew metal, but I didn't know what that meant.
Sure.
Exactly. So that's how I learned about that show, was
from Chad.
That interaction, and I went to it, and that was my first earliest experience seeing Shai Hulud play, was at the Prop Room.
Yeah, I remember Bloodlet was supposed to play that show too, but for some reason they couldn't make it down.
And just speaking of Bloodlet, because they kind of remind me of that more metallic hardcore, and I don't think Bloodlet gets a lot of love that they should.
No, agreed.
I know the word underrated gets thrown around too often, but I do believe Bloodlet is an underrated band from that era.
Absolutely.
So they're also a Florida band, of course. So did you get a chance to play any shows at Bloodlet?
Not until we toured with them in, I think, 97. It was either 97 or 98, but we did a full U.S. tour with Bloodlet, became really good friends with those guys. I was, until I started seeing them live every night, I was never a fan, but after that tour, I was like, fucking Bloodlet forever. I had a Bloodlet sticker on my guitar and everything. Yeah, Bloodlet is really cool, and definitely sadly overlooked. But that is incredible that you were at that show and that Chad gave you the flyer for it. A little side note about the Prop Room. I went and saw Neurosis there. I don't know if you were at that show, but Neurosis, I get asked this question from time to time. What's the loudest concert you've ever been to? and it was definitely Neurosis at the Prop Room. It was so loud, I had to leave. I couldn't take it. It was so bad.
It wasn't a large space. It was kind of small.
Yeah. I just remember seeing Neurosis there and them being too loud to take. I couldn't handle it.
One of the best shows I saw there was the Deftones.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They played the Prop Room. Will Haven and Far opened up for them.
Oh, I think I remember hearing about that.
That was a crazy show because there was overcapacity and a lot of people couldn't get in. And
Sure. Do you remember what year that was?
It had to have been around the same time, 97, 98. It was somewhere in that era, I want to say.
Yeah, because I remember when Will Haven we were on the same label, Crisis Records.
Right.
So, I remember hearing they were on tour with the Deftones. That was a big deal for them.
That was.
Yeah.
Really good show. And so it's so great to be talking about some of these different experiences. And I know we were talking about some of the different death metal bands. You mentioned Bloodlit just a moment ago. Were you starting to become more cognizant of these other scenes that were in Florida, whether it be in Gainesville, whether it be in Orlando or in Tampa? Was any of that happening with you internally at that point?
I mean, the Murrychesstoes played a show in Orlando for like 6 people once. And with my friends in Strong Arm, I filled in on drums for a small fest in Tampa called Hardcore 94. I'm assuming it was 94. So I was kind of aware, through friends' bands. Also, I went and saw Tension and Strong Arm at another show that was near Tampa. So, yeah, my friends' bands who were branching out, I went with them to their shows and would kind of learn about the scene. Gainesville, I had never been to until Hulud played there, probably in maybe around 98 or so, maybe a little earlier. But, I see your comp back there. We also played at 403 Chaos once. But that's Tampa, am I correct?
That is Tampa. Yes.
Oh, okay. For a second, I thought it was Gainesville.
Nope, definitely Tampa. There were some bands that may have been from different parts that were on that compilation.
Like I said, with Hulud is where we played Tampa the most. We had great shows at the Refuge, which was also like a church. Do you know the Refuge? It's a place that Under Oath used to play all the time.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, we got turned on to that place by the Strong Arm guys, because they were Christian. And the place was also called, I think when it wasn't a Christian venue, it was called Joe Mocha's. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I think that was in St. Pete.
Okay, St. Pete. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know how far St. Pete is from Tampa. I always kind of equate them as being...
It's in the greater
Tampa
Bay area. Yeah.
So, but we would play Joe Mocha's or the Refuge. We had great shows there. The only thing I remember is a lot of the shows that we would play, the crowd was very Christian. That's where we first met Under Oath. They were like 7 years old at the time.
Did Bingo Mutt, while you were playing with them, did they ever play anywhere else outside of South Florida?
We did West Palm for sure, many times. I know we did Miami, Fort Lauderdale. We did play Gainesville. We did a fest with Magadog, and headlining was Less Than Jake. That was really fun. That's how I got turned on to Less Than Jake. I bought their first 7-inch there, Smoke Spot, and I loved it. Still a great record. But, so Bingo Mutt played that fest in Gainesville. And that might, between Murrychesstoes playing Orlando for 6 people and Bingo Mutt playing Gainesville, those were probably, and Strong Arm filling in for them in Tampa, those were probably my first forays out of my local scenes. You know, and even, I would go to the Treehouse often, like I was saying, but when I really learned about Bingo Mutt before I was in the band, I was like, wow, there's a whole Coral Springs scene here. It's like, and they're the same as us. They're our age. They're goofy kids, that are also scared of skinheads. So we would, that's when I would start venturing out to Coral Springs, and how I became friends with all the guys in Gus, or Puddle. Puddle was essentially Gus. Gus just wrote and did more. Both cool bands. But yeah, that's, I remember being excited by the West Palm scene and the Coral Springs scene because they were relatively close, but it was an entirely new group of really great kids playing in these really cool new bands. Coral Springs is where we met more of the punk guys, and the foundation was like all the quote-unquote tough guy hardcore bands came out of there. But great stuff and absolutely brilliant memories.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So as we're now getting into the mid-90s, around 95 is when Shai Hulud got started together? Is that right?
The way Hulud started was I had groups of friends that didn't know each other at the time. Like, I was working at Uncle Sam's with my friend Oliver, who was Shai Hulud's first other guitar player.
Is that Pompano Uncle Sam's?
Pompano Uncle Sam's, yep. Then I had my friend Dave and Damien Moyal once contacted me. I remember he contacted me out of the blue, said, yeah, we don't know each other, but I know you're a good guitar player and I'm a good singer. We should start a band. So I was like the focal point where my friend Dave wanted to start a band with me. My friend Oliver wanted to start a band with me. And Damien called me and said, hey, let's start a band. So I thought, wow, I've got all the members except the drummer. And that's how Shai Hulud ended up getting together. That was we think in 1995. Pretty sure, because that's when we did our. I think that's when we did our demo.
Yeah, the demo was in 95.
Yeah,
sure. What do you remember about recording the demo?
I have a tendency to go into the studio unprepared. So I remember being unprepared for sure. And I remember, I don't know, I watched your interview with Damien, but I can't remember what he said about Hulud. But at the time it was, we had some trouble between us. And I remember he wanted to go into the studio alone. I should preface this by saying Damien is currently just one of the greatest, sweetest, best guys. I absolutely love Damien, and I love As Friends Russ, and even his solo project, Damien Dunn. But at the time, there was a little static between us. And he wanted to go in the studio by himself and record the vocals. And so none of us were allowed in the studio. And none of us heard the vocals until they were finished. And when we went into mix, he had specific instructions, for us to follow. So what I remember about that session is mainly kind of feeling like, okay, so we don't know what we're getting with some of these songs until we hear it. But overall, that's when we met Staska, and we obviously had great experiences with him. We went back to him for, oh no, you know what? I met him when we recorded with Bingo Mutt.
Okay.
Bingo Mutt recorded their first 7-inch with him. That might be the first time that I ever met Jeremy. Maybe there was something before. I'm not really sure, but.
And for those that don't know, this is Studio 13, Jeremy Staska. This was in Deerfield, right?
The legend, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what was that first experience like when you were at the recording studio when you were doing Bingo Mutt?
When I was a drummer and recorded, which was only a couple times maybe, I was typically more prepared than I was as a guitar player. Yeah, I absolutely loved recording the Bingo Mutt 7-inch. I had a blast. I hope the other guys did too. I loved the band, got along great with Jeremy. We had such a good time. And I think that 7-inch, for what it is still holds up. I think it's a really fun record.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a fun record. Did you know Jeremy's drumming days, Sinful Lust?
I never... To this day, I've definitely heard the Sinful Lust demo, but I don't think I ever saw them. I knew that they were one of the bands around, but I wasn't too familiar with them. In fact, I would say that I probably became more familiar with Sinful Lust when we started recording there. And that might be around the time that I heard the demo and the legendary song Shakma.
What was the difference between that initial experience with Jeremy when you were doing Bingo Mutt and then when you were now shifting to guitar with Shai Hulud?
Well, like I said, Jeremy would always be, I think, I don't know if he was annoyed, but I would always have to do, first of all, I should say, I'm a terrible guitar player. Recording me is very difficult because I punch in a lot. I make a lot of dumb mistakes. I could play it perfectly until you hit the record button, and then all of a sudden I forget the riff. So I remember having to do a lot of punch-ins with Jeremy.
Is it just nerves and anxiety or something?
Yeah, and probably just being Jewish in general. But yeah, so that'll get me canceled. Yeah, so recording with Jeremy was always fun for me, but I think he may have wished it would have gone a little easier because, I wanted things to be as tight as possible, but I wasn't necessarily playing as tight as possible.
So this was your first foray into playing guitar in a band, right?
Shai Hulud, no, Murrychesstoes started with me on drums, but eventually I moved to guitar.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it.
So my first recording experience was before we knew about Staska. There was a place that we went, Organized Pain went, the Shrooms went there. It was a place called The Environment. It was just this small little studio. I can't remember the engineer's name, but a lot of us did our demos there, and the Murrychesstoes did our first demo there. And thinking back, that was my absolute first experience of recording guitar in a studio. And I may have misspoken when I said that I was unprepared for early Hulud. Early Hulud, I think I had things more figured out, but I do remember recording for the Fabulous Murrychesstoes. I really had absolutely no idea. I'd never recorded two guitars before. So I remember as I was playing, like, I don't know if I'm supposed to ring out here. I don't know if I'm supposed to stop. I don't know if I'm supposed to be playing something else. So it wasn't really even being, as far as the Murrychesstoes demo, it wasn't so much being unprepared as I just didn't know what to do. I'd never tracked guitars before. Like I was saying, I knew that I was supposed to essentially double the guitars, but there was one part in one song that we recorded. The song was called Break, and there was a break in the song where only one guitar was playing, and I remember I didn't know what to do with the second guitar. So again, I just didn't really know. I hadn't recorded yet, and I was still learning. Hulud, by the time we recorded Hulud, I think we had done some like rough demos. I did rough demos. I had a 4-track, and I would tap out drums on like a chest or something. And we used that 4-track at Oliver's house once, and we recorded it's actually on our first demo CD. We just re-released the demo with Damien with 6 songs, but before that there was a CD of a whole bunch of recordings that we made, and the very first demo of our song This Wake was on that CD. And we literally, like I was saying, we literally did that with, first I tapped out all the drums on this big chest that Oliver had, and then we went back and recorded 2 guitars. So by the time we went into Hulud's recordings, I did know a little bit much, and I think the unpreparedness came more with our first album when things started getting a little more intricate. Our second album recording that was really difficult, because we went into the studio and I didn't have second guitar parts written, and I didn't even realize that I needed second guitar parts until we needed them.
Right.
And so, there's a myth that says, I heard that Shai Hulud had to record That Within Blood Tempered 6 times. No, he was only twice. And the first time we tracked it, like I said, I didn't have everything written, so I had to finish the second guitar parts and all the transitions, and then we went back and recorded it again.
Sure. Now, the evolution of Shai Hulud has a story all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different members have come in and out of the band.
Sure.
I really want to focus this part on some of the earliest members, as a lot of the band's period is in Florida. So we think about some of the different members that have come in and out of the band. Anyone else come to mind that you think has that hand in the story of Shai Hulud?
Well, Jason Lederman was the first drummer. Damien brought him in because, like I said, we didn't have a drummer. And then shortly thereafter, Steve moved from St. Pete to Pompano to play in Strong Arm, and he liked what I was doing and said, let's do it. So he ended up being in both Strong Arm and Shai Hulud for a while.
And with Jason Lederman being in so many other bands as well, and he was also a guest on the podcast, were you familiar at all with any of his music, or was that the first time you got a chance to know him?
No, I loved the Machine. I don't have them anymore, unfortunately, but I used to listen to those 2 7-inches all the time. I like those records a lot. What was what was the hardcore punk band that he was in that I love?
He was in Beyond Reason.
Beyond Reason. I absolutely love that 7-inch. So when I met Jason, I was like, wow, cool. Beyond Reason is, I still have that record. I love that record. Talk about, underrated. That record should have been bigger, especially in South Florida.
Sure.
That's good stuff. No, so I was a fan of Jason's before. If I remember correctly, I would play Machine riffs at practice, and he would get a little annoyed at me for that. But I genuinely like those records.
And with Steven, that's Steven Kleisath?
Steve Kleisath, yes, sir.
Yep. Okay. So when he came into the picture, how did that shift things?
Well, I'll tell you this. I've said this many times before in many conversations and in many podcasts, but my life was changed musically twice. The first time I heard Metallica blew my mind. I'd never heard music that sounded like that before. The second time music was completely turned on its ear for me was when I started playing with Steve Kleisath. I simply didn't know you could be so creative and have drum parts that not only complemented the song, but were something to behold in and of itself. You know, like what Steve did, his drum parts were so cool. I remember we were practicing at Strong Arms practice space, and I showed Steve the song Hardly, and he said, okay, I'm just going to play something regular right now, but I'll write my drum parts for it, and next time we practice, I'll have something different. And I remember thinking, what are you talking? I didn't say this to him, but I said in my head, what are you talking about? The drums do obviously what they do. The guitar tells you what the drums are going to do. And then we practiced with Steve again, and he, like I said, there were all these new accents. There were beats that I never thought of that would be there. I was completely blown away. So getting Steve in the band not only changed the trajectory of the band, it also changed my whole approach to writing music. So, yeah, Steve's one of my best friends, and he, right after Metallica, completely changed my life musically.
Wow. You mentioned the song Hardly.
Yeah.
That was on the demo and also on A Profound Hatred of Man, the first 7-inch from Shai Hulud. Talk to me about whose idea was it for the band name, and who came up with the way that the name was stylized on that 7-inch?
Well, funnily enough, I've said this before, so anyone who's heard the story, I apologize. But I knew that, like, Shai Hulud was going to be, this is before we had the name. I knew that this band, the stuff that I was writing, I thought was, well, I should say the stuff that we were writing was pretty cool. You know, I really liked, I thought Hardly was a really catchy song. I was impressed with what we came up with for This Wake. So I loved the song For the World. You know, before it was called For the World, as you know, it was probably called Sav Kipu, written by Damien. But what I'm getting at is we had really cool stuff, so I wanted a really cool name. I didn't want another Fabulous Murrychesstoes. I wanted something that had like depth to it. So shortly before, well, a couple of years before we started writing music for Shai Hulud, I had seen the movie and read the book Dune. This is back in high school. So a few years before. I was probably 18 when I saw the movie, maybe 17 when I saw the movie and read the book. And so I really, at the time, fell in love with that story. So Dave Silber, who is our original bass player, he and I were talking about what to name the band. And I said to him, let's take it from Dune. You know, it's a cool story and it's got depth, because we didn't have any lyrics yet. So we didn't have any depth. All we had was music that could hopefully grow into being something deeper. But so I wanted something with like a background in literature, so we could come out and be a little more serious, more serious than Murrychesstoes, and be something different than we've ever done before. So that's how we decided to come up with something from Dune. So Dave, this is before cell phones. We were just on the phone, and Dave had just watched Dune, the movie with Sting, and he said, "Yeah, I like the movie. I really like this character." And he was trying to explain the character to me, and I said, "Are you talking about Shai Hulud?" And he says, "I don't know. Is that this thing?" And I said, "I think that's what you're talking about. I'm not sure." So he said, "Well, okay, yeah, Shai Hulud." So we ended up naming the band Shai Hulud. But the funny part is, I went to Dave's house probably not too long after that, and we watched Dune together, and then a different character came on the screen, and he said, "That's the character I want to name the band after," which I think we'd already played our first show with Discount at their warehouse under the name Shai Hulud. So he says, he points out a different character and says, "That's what I want. That's what I want to name the band after." I said, "Well, that's the Third Stage Navigator." I said, "Should we call our band Third Stage Navigator?" And we had already played a show, so we stuck with Hulud. But that's how it came about.
Who was responsible for the way the name was stylized?
I guess me. I think somewhere, I don't know where it would be, but I have early drawings. Whenever I tend to, I mean, I'm not an artist by any stretch, but when I would come up with a band name, I tend to try to draw logos for them. And when I do it, I usually make long, skinny letters for some reason. And that's how Shai Hulud's logo started, like long, skinny letters. And my Josh Colbert of Strongarm ended up marrying Chad Neptune's sister. They're still currently married, and Chad Neptune's sister was great with computer art. So I remember she was working with me, and she said, "Well, let's try to find a font for your band." And I remember going through fonts with her, and I know it's like the most hated font, but I said, out of all these fonts that you're choosing for Shai Hulud, or that you're showing me, I like this one best, and it was Comic Sans. So the logo is actually, especially on, well, even the later iteration of the logo, but the logo was the Comic Sans, kind of elongated. We colored it in, and then I can't remember if Chad and I did it or if it was just me. I don't remember, but let's just say we did it. We took white out, and like the only word that I could come up with is like to say crustify. We crustified what we had, the Comic Sans logo that we had colored in, and that's what became the logo on Profound Hatred of Man. And then we made another logo that came on our second album, That Within Blood Ill Tempered. But we made that logo, that one Chad and I definitely made together. And that's the story of how the logo came about.
Who knew? It was that deep.
Yeah. No, it was fun. We used to spend so many hours at Kinko's in Coral Springs.
Right.
I'm sure you know it well.
University and...
was it Royal Palm?
Yes, which would turn into Copens. Yes.
Copens, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yes.
Wow. So I also remember too, Matt, that there were some of the early flyers where the name was misspelled. Was that on purpose, or was that because just it happened and they weren't sure how to spell the name or what?
It still happens to this day. Shai Hulud is the most common misspelling. Yeah, that was definitely not on purpose. In fact, it's funny that it's spelled, the misspelling is Halud, because when we first picked out the name and we confirmed that that's what we were going to call it, I remember saying, I just don't like that there's two U's in Hulud. And that was fixed for me by everybody misspelling it.
Right.
I don't know if you know this, but on the first 5,000 of Profound Hatred of Man, the CD, Shai Hulud is misspelled on the spine.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, it says Shai Hulud on the spine. Yeah, that was our first foray. As we used to joke around, because we had troubles with various vans. People were misspelling our name, especially on the CDs. So we used to call ourselves the Griswolds of hardcore.
There you go, easy enough, right there.
We wanted to make a T-shirt at one time, the Griswolds of hardcore. We probably should have, yeah.
Right. So as Shai Hulud is starting to play out more,
yeah,
what are some of the different places that the band's playing? Was it straight to clubs and venues, or was it like backyards and that sort of thing? Like, where was the band playing?
Cheers a lot, Club Q a lot. We did some other random shows at different places, but Churchill's also. Foundation was before. I don't know that the Foundation or the Pit or 21 North, all the names that it was called, I don't know if that was around by the time Shai Hulud was together. It may have been, and we may have played there. I really don't recall. But
a little further north than just Palm Beach, you get into like Fort Pierce and Vero. I know you all played the women's club.
Yeah,
Schoolhouse.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. We played the Schoolhouse quite a few times.
What was that like playing there?
Oh, those were fun. Floor shows.
Right.
But usually pretty decently attended, and usually pretty decent reactions too. I loved the old Schoolhouse. That was a fun place. Any shows that we had in Vero were awesome. I loved playing there.
So as the band is starting to play out more, talk about the vibe of the crowd. How was the band being received by those? Because it was different than your typical hardcore. You mentioned a lot of the bands that you were a fan of, bands like Sick of It All, for example.
Yeah.
Very different than a band like Shai Hulud, at least to my ears. So how was the reception from people?
Well, we played like a lot of newer bands do. We played to crowds that were receptive to us, but didn't know our songs. And so there was like no movement. There was, we're just playing in front of kids and they're watching some group of guys with people they may know play some new music. So yeah, the reaction was never crazy, but I remember at Cheers, I'm pretty sure this is right after A Profound Hatred of Man, the single, the 7-inch came out. We went into, I don't even remember what song, but we went into a song from that record, and the whole, this is, I don't even remember if I said Cheers. No, it wasn't at Cheers. It was Club Q. The whole place blew up. Maybe it was Hardly, but all of a sudden people were fucking moshing. People were up front singing along. And I remember Chad just looks at me like this. He was pretty young. Shai, that was one of his first bands. His first band was called Backscatter. But so I remember him being really blown away by the fact that people knew our song and were singing along to it and moshing. So the look he made was just like this, for those of you that are just listening, just an incredulous, surprised look, because we'd played so many shows where these same people that are now going off were just standing there. But what else were they supposed to do? They didn't know the songs, you know. But once that record came out, things started changing, and that was really nice for us.
And Club Q was interesting. I mean, one, it was in Davie, for those that aren't familiar with Club Q. It was in Davie,
Yeah.
which is very country in many respects, Davie.
Yes.
Talk about some of the stories from Club Q. What else stands out to you, Matt?
Well, I remember our friend Coma, which was his tag name, kicked out like a tile or something from the ceiling at one of our, I think at the show that I'm talking about where we first got a reaction. He was like on top of the crowd and he kicked out something. I remember we got in trouble for that. The Club Q days were great. I always felt weird because the venue also, like you're saying, felt a little country. I didn't know that they were really welcoming of the kids that were there or this type of music. I mean, it was strange that we were having so many shows there, because I don't know if you ever met the people that ran Club Q, but they were kind of country. You know,
I've been there one time. I thought there was a show.
Yeah.
I was there on an off night.
Okay.
I didn't think I was in the same space because it was so different than what would have been a typical hardcore punk Club Q night.
Yeah. People playing pool and just drinking at the bar, you know? So, yeah, it was I don't know who started booking shows there. Could have been John Wiley for all I know.
I remember, too, when I had Amy Fiddler on, she mentioned she had also been booking some shows at Club Q, too. I don't know if anyone else had a hand in that, but I know she had mentioned she had booked some shows there.
That makes sense. I knew Amy mostly from Cheers.
Did she book you guys at Cheers?
Did she book? She must have. I know Alex Roundhouse booked us a few times there. He gave us, which is probably our first. This is before the Entomb show. This is probably our first kind of bigger show. It was us, Brethren, Indecision, and Shutdown. And that was like, we thought, wow, we're playing with these tough guy New York bands. One, we were scared, like, are they going to be nice to us or are they going to be tough guys?
What was the crowd like for that show?
Oh, it was crazy. This is after we had stuff out. So, we had a lot of our friends there, and now there were other people that knew the band from the record or records maybe at that time. So we had that was a great show, and that was booked by Alex Roundhouse. That one I remember for sure. We also did at Cheers. I don't remember who booked it. It could have been Alex. It could have been Amy Fiddler. It could have been someone else. Wasn't the lady who owned Cheers, I think her name was Gay? Does that sound
right? Yes.
I don't know if we ever did shows straight through her, but we got asked to play with Earth Crisis and Vision of Disorder. Bird of Ill-Omen also played that show.
Right.
And Culture also did a couple songs.
Wow. What was that experience like?
Awesome. I think there are videos from it online. Watching the videos, it might not be as crazy as I remember it being, but this was still pretty early on after we released something. So it was, like, as far as I was concerned, a crazy reaction because, there were people that were singing along and moving and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, that was...
Did a band like Earth Crisis have any influence on you guys, considering they were one of the earlier metallic-y, hardcore kind of bands that were going on?
Did Earth Crisis have an impact on Shai Hulud? Huge. Absolutely huge. So huge, I ripped off one of their songs. They have a song called Born from Pain that's got this part I just loved at the end of the song. And I didn't steal the chords, I didn't steal the riff, but I stole the idea and put it in our song, If Born from This Soil. Yeah, so Earth Crisis we all absolutely loved Earth Crisis. That was like, they were the kings of the hardcore scene at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still to this day a huge Earth Crisis fan. Chad, so is Chad. As far as I recall, we all really, really liked Earth Crisis a lot. So playing that show, aside from we're playing with a band that we love, a band whose poster I had on my door, we're also playing with the kings of the hardcore scene in 1997.
Sure. You also mentioned that on that same show was Bertaville Omen.
Yep. That's what I loved about the hardcore scene in Florida. First of all, if I haven't said it already, I just love the Florida the Florida music scene in general. I'm sure people feel nostalgic and, really close to all of their scenes in different areas, but I just always felt that Florida scene was really, really special. And what I loved about the hardcore scene is that a band like Brethren was, kind of New York styled hardcore, and whatever the hell we were, and whatever the hell Bertaville Omen was, like just the sound of chaos, really, like bludgeoning, the screeching chaos. And all of those bands could all play shows together and no one would bat an eye, because it didn't matter that the bands were different. It was all Florida. It was all South Florida. And it was, as I recall it, of course there was some infighting here and there, and, bands competed with each other, but I don't know. I felt, especially during that time, and even for years before that, I just felt that Florida was a really strong united scene. I loved, not to keep going on, but we loved Brethren, we loved Bertaville Omen, we loved Out of Spite, we loved Tension. All these bands, aside, Strong Arm and us were similar because we ripped off Strong Arm, of course, but even the bands with the different sounds, it was still all just South Florida hardcore, and it was so fucking awesome.
So around 1997, we talked about the 7-inch that came out.
Yep.
And then there was the full-length album, Hearts Once Nourished with Hope and Compassion, and that was on Crisis as well. How did you get that connection to Crisis? How did they sign you guys?
Simply through working at Uncle Sam's. I worked at Uncle Sam's, and Oliver, our first guitar player, was working there, and he was doing a lot of the ordering for the store from Victory. And he said, hey, do you want to do the ordering from Revelation? And I just thought, wow, that is so cool. So I started, doing the ordering from Revelation, and I was just being friendly with the lady who ran the distribution. Her name was Jeannie, still is Jeannie. Jeannie's great. And, we got to be friendly after recording. We got to be friendly after talking a few times a week for, a few weeks. And then one day I just said, hey, my band is recording. And she said, oh, by this time we're friendly. So, she treated me like she was interested, and she said, oh, that's awesome. You should send a demo to me and I'll pass it on to the people. And I was blown away. I thought, wow, you're going to get my demo to somebody at Revelation that could possibly sign us? And she said, yeah. So we sent it to her. And around that time, a guy named Rob Moran, who played bass, still does play bass in the band Unbroken, was resurrecting the sub-label from Revelation, Crisis Records. So, I remember talking to Jeannie after she and everybody else heard the demo, and she said, "We all love it. Someone's going to call you about possibly signing. You got to be kidding. This is really happening." And then we got a call from Rob, and he said that he was running Crisis Records, the side label of Rev. And he said, "We love the demo. We want to know if you would want to sign." We couldn't believe it. I don't know how many shows we had played at that point. Probably a few, because this is when Damien was still in the band. The only hiccup was when we told Rev or Crisis that we were parting ways with Damien. We said we have somebody new. They said, "Well, send us a demo with a new singer. It doesn't have to be a professional one, but we want to make sure that it's still good." And we did a warehouse. Our warehouse was in Davie at this time, like 2 blocks away from Club Q. So we recorded Chad singing our songs and sent that to Rev. And Rob got back to me and said, "You're on Crisis if you want to be." And we were, even though it wasn't Revelation, it was Rev adjacent, and we were so thrilled. Funny little story about that. I remember we got the contract, and I had it at Uncle Sam's, and I remember Dave Silber and I are looking at the contract, like flipping through the pages. We didn't understand a word. We didn't know what mechanical royalties were. We didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And Dave and I literally looked at each other at the same time, and at the same time we both said, "Burn," and we signed. Burn being one of our favorite bands on Revelation, and us saying Burn was us saying, "Hey, if it's good enough for Burn, it's good enough for us." And yeah, we signed the contract and never looked back.
Wow. Yeah. Did you eventually, as time went on, talk to lawyers and that sort of thing? And
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? I think Oliver was the smartest of us back then. Because if I remember correctly, he got us a lawyer, maybe not for the first contract, but when we definitely had a lawyer look at something right before Hearts came out, because I remember even thanking him on the thanks list. But yeah, we learned our lesson. We made some stupid mistakes, like 23, 24-year-old kids do. We gave away half our publishing to some guy. Yeah, so we made our mistakes, but we ended up figuring it out, kinda.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a bummer to hear, but it's something that you hear in a lot of stories, unfortunately, when things are just starting out with publishing most often.
Yeah. Even the funny thing is, the publisher we signed with, he had also on his roster, he had Overcast, he had Hatebreed, he had Shadows Fall. So he had some bands that we knew. And, I remember the big thing was he got an Overcast song on a TV movie that was written by Peter Benchley, the guy who wrote Jaws. And we thought, well, that's pretty fucking cool. Let's sign with this guy. So yeah, we definitely made a few mistakes when, signing as kids without having a lawyer and such.
Well, when it came to the music itself,
yeah,
that's something that, as I'm sure you've heard over the course of time, that a lot of people tend to lean on Hearts as their ultimate favorite Shai Hulud record.
Sure.
Now, that could be debatable between other people, but that has come up often. And talk to us about the recording of that. I know I saw Steve Heritage's name. I don't know how much involvement he had in recording it. Where was that recorded? Who else was involved with it? And what was that experience like just making that album?
I may look back at things and only remember the happy thoughts. I'm sure there was difficulty recording it, but I remember really loving the experience. Steve Heritage, who was, I think was he the guitarist or bassist for Assuck? I don't remember. But he engineered and mixed the whole album. We absolutely loved Steve. We stayed at his house. We got along with him so well, and it was recorded at Moorsound. And I think Steve was more familiar with the history of Moorsound than I was. I like I told you, when I got into hardcore, I kind of left metal behind. So I wasn't even aware that Moorsound was this. I knew it was like a big and important studio, but I didn't know it was like this legendary place that recorded some killer death metal. But yeah, we recorded, apparently, we were in like Studio B or C, and Deicide was recording in Studio A. And according to Oliver, apparently we were eating Chick-fil-A at a table, and he clucked and ran around the table like a chicken while we were eating Chick-fil-A. This is what Oliver told us. I don't know. I don't have a memory of that myself. But yeah, Glenn Benton of Deicide apparently did that.
What was the vibe compared to recording, let's say, with Jeremy Staska at Studio 13? How was it different?
Oh, that's a good question. We got along super well with Jeremy, and we got along really well with Steve Heritage. So I think we ended up we didn't go to Moorsound because of anything we were unhappy with Jeremy. It was just like, this is going to be our first album. Jeremy did A Profound Hatred of Man, and we were really happy with that. In fact, I like the recording and the production of A Profound Hatred of Man more than I like Hearts. But, we wanted to go, just like the Jeffersons. We were moving on up. We thought, let's go to we're doing our first full length for Crisis. Let's go to a bigger studio. I don't even remember who chose Moorsound, but
did you have a larger budget since there was a label now involved?
Oh yeah, it wasn't much, but I remember we did it for whatever amount they gave us. It was done pretty quickly. But going back to what you said, the vibe wasn't much different. I mean, Moorsound was bigger, but we worked with only one person. Really, there was there might have been like a different engineer around doing other stuff, but we mainly worked with Steve Heritage, and at Studio 13, we mainly worked with Jeremy. And like I said, we loved both of those guys. We got along really well. So I don't remember the vibe being much different aside from the bigness of the studio.
And when it came to the recording of it, how happy were you and the other band members with the final outcome of the recording?
Oh, I hated it.
Interesting. Why did you hate it?
I thought the production was very dark and muddy. I remember we were driving up to New York to play a show, or maybe some shows, but this has got to be in 97 before it came out. I remember driving up to New York, listening to the cassette of Hearts Once Nourished, the final mixed version, in my Walkman. And I remember getting to the song we had already tracked it. I mean, and what I mean by that is place the songs in order for the record. And I was on track number 2, My Heart Bleeds the Darkest Blood. And for some reason, I just thought to myself, and I literally thought this, I've said this in other interviews before, I thought, well, whatever career we managed to eke out up to this point, it's all over now. Because I really thought the album was bad. But I will say, and I have said plenty of times before, it is my least favorite Shai Hulud album. The band got smarter, more technical, more emotional. You know, we've done. If someone disagrees, that's totally fine. But I believe we've done better. But I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled, because I mean, when we play the hard songs, those do typically get, you know, consistently great reactions.
Sure.
So no, I'm really happy. I love a few of the songs. I really love, and there were definitely a couple songs that were written like 2 days before that. I don't want to say they're necessarily throwaways, but they're songs 30 years later that we have never played live.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Eating Bullets of Acceptance has never been played live. Beliefs and Obsessions has never been played live. That might be the only two. But those two were written really last minute. And there's some good riffs in those songs. But, you know, it was literally, it's Tuesday, we go in on Thursday, we only have 6 songs. What are we going to do? So Steve and I got into a room, and, you know, I don't even think we ever practiced the songs at volume. They were just done in my room at Oliver's condo or Oliver's townhouse with Steve in the room with me. That's what I remember.
And you all toured pretty quickly after the release of that record, right?
Yeah. Like I said, we were going up to New York before the album came out, and shortly after we did the tour with Bloodlet. That was the next year. We toured with Overcast and Disembodied. That was also the next year. But yeah, we did some shows on our own, and did as much touring as we could. Typically with Strong Arm. I think they took us out on our first 2 tours.
And was this on the East Coast of the country, or were you starting to go further, the Midwest and that sort of thing?
Oh, we went Midwest and West. Our first tour with Strong Arm, we toured in Dave's mother's, I think it was a Cadillac. It was a silver car that was like a Cadillac, and we called it the Silver Bullet. So we were in the Silver Bullet, and we took that thing all the way to California.
And when you guys were playing a lot of the different Florida cities, and you played a lot of different areas throughout the entire state of Florida.
Yeah.
Did any come to mind? I know you mentioned 403 Chaos. Shai.
Yeah.
You played Sluggos in Pensacola.
Oh, yeah. We definitely played Sluggos a couple times.
What do you remember about the Sluggo shows?
The people that were there, we made really good friends. I still have good friends from Pensacola that we met from those Sluggo shows. But the shows that I recall were sparsely attended. Like I said, we have some diehard people that were from Pensacola, but our shows there were, again, not so many people.
Gotcha.
But not bad experiences at all.
One show that brought out a lot more people, but it was more of an event, the Slammy Awards in '97. You all played that at Squeeze. Any memories of that show?
Yeah, there's actually, I don't know if I remember seeing a video or if I just remember seeing it live, but Chris Carrabba, Dashboard Confessional himself, was on top of the crowd, like with his fists in the air, screaming along to Hardly. That was awesome. I believe I think little Chad Gilbert has a video of that somewhere. I don't know if that's the truth, but I think he might. Yeah, what I remember about that show was I borrowed Josh Colbert from Strong Arm's guitar, and I couldn't keep it in tune. So I was going out of tune a lot at that show. But despite the troubles we had with the guitar, yeah, I remember a lot of people coming out. I was so... Again, here's my love and, you know, the nostalgia for South Florida. First of all, how cool were the Slammies? It's just so cool, you know? And I never won one, but Josh won a Slammy for playing guitar in Strong Arm, and he's got this little skull trophy. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I wish I would have got one of those. But, yeah, we were so honored to play the Slammies, because for years before that, you know, those were for other bands. It wasn't for, you know, we were just young kids, and finally we got welcomed into that scene. So I personally was really happy to have played the Slammies, and the show went off. Kids weren't crazy, like I said, despite the guitar troubles. But, man, what a cool show. Just a great night in general.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys also played a couple shows in Coral Springs. There weren't a lot of venues at that time in Springs, and one of which was at Coral Springs High School.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Played that show, and that was with Newfound Glory. I want to say played that, which,
yep,
of course, went on to and still is with Newfound Glory. So... Playing a high school, was that the first time you ever had a show like that?
First time. Like I said, we played the old schoolhouse, we played a library, we played warehouses.
This was an active, like, high school. So.
High school, yeah, Coral Springs High, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely Chad that arranged that whole show. But I remember it being a blast. I remember having a great time playing that show. And I recall the crowd going pretty crazy, too.
Yeah.
Newfound Glory was obviously a newer band at the time.
Right.
But yeah, what a fun show that was.
You also did a show at the Coral Springs City Center, which was right near Mullins Park, which also had its own shows once upon a time, too.
Yeah.
Did you catch any shows at Mullins when they were?
No, I've never even heard of it until now.
Okay. So, the Coral Springs City Center, back when it was called that, do you remember that show at all?
I believe so. That was with Where Fear and Weapons Meet, and Newfound Glory. And this is when Newfound Glory was a bit bigger. So I remember we still headlined, but I remember I have pictures from that show somewhere. Yeah, as I recall, all the bands did really well. That was a packed show. I just remember that being a great night in general. All the bands Where Fear and Weapons Meet, I remember killing it. Newfound Glory. I don't know if they had Nothing Gold Can Stay Out at that point, but you know, they had their high school. Their high school was all there. They all turned out, and everyone went crazy for Newfound Glory for sure. Right. And then I think I remember being nervous, like, you know, is anyone going to care about us after Where Fear and Weapons Meet and Newfound Glory just killed it? But yeah, we had a really good show. That was a fun night, night for sure.
It's great to hear some of those memories. And another venue that was known for shows, large and small, was the Edge, which became the Chili Pepper and then now Revolution, what it's been for quite some time. Any memories of both seeing shows and playing the Edge?
Well, I played a show with Bingo Mutt. It was us and I think the Bosstones. And we had to play outside for some reason. And I think our guitar player got drunk and knocked my drums over. And we had to stop our set. So that was I believe that was the first time I played the Edge. Then we played a more normal show with Shai Hulud. But for some reason, I remember it not being great. I don't know that the crowd cared, and I don't know that we played that well. But that's hard to believe because Steve always played well. Steve was the drummer at that time. But maybe I used to, not so much these days, but I used to go crazier than I could. And obviously my guitar playing would be compromised by my movements. So maybe I just didn't play that well that night myself. But we played there with H2O and Murphy's Law. And that was it was a fun show.
Sure.
But you know Pete Kowalski from Remembering Never.
Yes.
May he rest in peace. Yeah. I knew him from Uncle Sam's, and he ended up coming to that show. And the next time that I talked to him, he said, "Yeah, you guys weren't that good that night." So I have it in my head not being a great show, probably because of me. Because, like I said, Steve really never had a bad show. But yeah, still fun. That flyer pops up on Instagram from time to time.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was a good memory.
That's very cool. And going back up north central to Gainesville, I remember seeing you all play at the Gainesville Fest.
Oh, okay.
Which, not to be confused with the fest, totally separate.
Sure.
But the Gainesville Fest, I want to say it was around the same time, 97, 98, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
And that was at the YMCA campgrounds. You got any memories of that? Because that's a bit unconventional. You're playing at basically a campsite.
Yeah. I remember playing on the floor. And I remember people going decently crazy. Maybe not crazy, but, some sing-alongs and stuff. As I recall, we played 2 different Gainesville Fests. I'm struggling to remember the other. Oh, no. Yeah, one was a bigger one that was like everybody played. It was us, Kill Your Idols, Between the Buried and Me, Darkest Hour. That was later. That could have been after we moved to New York in 2000. But
so if we move outside of Gainesville and go more to the St. Pete area, what about the State Theater? Any memories of playing there?
State Theater has always been cool for us. I seem to have more memories playing the State Theater with our third singer, Geert, who's in the band now. Yeah, I remember playing there with him, but I don't remember us playing this. I really don't recall us playing the State Theater when we were based in Florida. But the State Theater show or shows that we had, that was kind of like a legendary place. Like a lot of, that I recall, a lot of big bands played there.
Right.
So, yeah, I remember the fact that we were playing there was like really cool to me. Like, wow, we're being invited to the cool kids party.
That's why I wanted to also get your thoughts, because it was a larger venue, and I know it's a bit fast forwarding ahead, just a sidebar though on the State Theater, the fact that it was larger in size. What was that like just for you? Although you were already moved away from Florida, but you're still back in your state, right? And you're playing, even though that wasn't in South Florida technically, but you're still playing this venue that draws a lot of people. So what was that like personally?
Like I said, I felt like Shai Hulud has always felt collectively, myself especially, like we were on the outside looking in. And I remember thinking playing the State Theater was us actually being invited in, somewhere that we typically wouldn't have access to. But the State Theater show that I recall was pretty decently attended. And I don't have a memory of it being like a total disaster. I remember we were probably at our biggest at that point, as far as like people coming out regularly. So yeah, that I think we filled the place well enough to the point where it doesn't leave a bad memory,
And that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you played a lot of shows. There's a ton, and just in Florida alone, one city that we haven't talked about, and I believe you had played a lot of shows up there too over the course of Hulud's journey, is Jacksonville. Any memories of playing any of those shows up that way?
Jacksonville, yeah, I remember a few shows. I can't remember the name of any venue, but there's one venue that I'm picturing in my head. We always had good shows there.
Jackrabbits, ring any bell?
Oh, yeah, Jackrabbits. Yeah, I think you're right. Also, we played like a little hardcore warehouse space that Chip from Destro helped arrange. It was booked by a guy who ended up singing for us, a guy named Mike Moynihan, who's now in the band Bad Beat. He booked us a show. I think his band at the time played, and that is, if I'm remembering correctly, is it Jacksonville? It might be Tallahassee. I get some of these places confused.
It's a big state.
It's a big state for sure. Well, this show that I'm talking about, either in Jacksonville or Tallahassee, I really don't remember, was insane.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, it was such a small room, but the reaction we got was like for a band 5 times our size.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that as being Jacksonville, though.
No worries. You mentioned Chip from Destro, which Destro was on the podcast and got back together. Almost all the members got back together to share their story. And part of their story was having their releases put out on Ides of March, which was your label at the time. Any memories of Ides of March and what that experience was like, and working with some bands like Destro and Glass Eater?
I'm not a business guy by any stretch of the imagination. So me running or starting a label was probably not the best idea. Not for me and not for the bands. Yeah, Ides of March was very short-lived. I learned very, as they say, fail fast. We did it for a couple years, a few years maybe. The best thing that we ever got was we put out, this is when CDs were selling more than vinyl. We put out Poison the Well's Tear from the Red on vinyl. Trustkill was kind enough to give that to us. So that did really well. But, as a label, I didn't advertise too much. I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt bad because, I really loved both Glass Eater and Destro. The first Glass Eater CD was which I put out, I thought was great. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but I remember telling some of the guys, I go, "This is a special band. This is a really good band." And I love Destro because it was just straight ahead, pissed hardcore. With some really cool stuff. So yeah, I honestly, what I remember most about that whole period is feeling bad that I didn't know what I was doing and that these bands could have done better. And Destro, I don't know if they ever looked for another label, but we all know Glass Eater went on to Victory, so they did better, which is good for them. But I had no business running a label.
Was it just something that you had on your bucket list of things you wanted to do? Like, how did you even decide now was the time for you to even start a label?
I honestly don't remember. It's not something I ever really wanted to do. I thought it was something that maybe I just could do. But I definitely didn't know the work involved. I mean, I may have done it purely because I really liked the Glass Eater. I think what I put out for Glass Eater, which is considered their first record, but I think it was actually a demo. But I thought it was so good that I really wanted to put it out.
Did you think that whole experience, did it tarnish any relationships, or were those things able to be repaired and salvaged if it did muddy any waters with anybody over the course of time?
There's some muddy waters there. We could leave it at that.
Okay.
Certainly not with Chip. Chip's still, I don't talk to him as much as I probably should, but I love him dearly. Things, I guess I could just say a little. There were no contracts, so anybody could do what they wanted, and that happened, which in the end hurt me financially. It's many, many years ago. Any of the people that I'm thinking of, I've seen in the years. I always say hello. I always shake their hand. We may not be in touch regularly, but, you can't really hold on to anger for that long.
Sure.
We made mistakes.
Yeah.
So, not my favorite period of things that I've done.
Understood. Well, thank you for sharing some of the thoughts around just what that experience was like.
Sure.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
It's all part of the journey, right? So
it is.
Yep. So as we're moving further along, I know we're getting close to wrapping things up here too. We've covered quite a bit when it comes to Shai Hulud, and then you all put out the 10-inch. That was the split with Indecision.
We were really excited at that period of time. Shai Hulud had developed a bit. Lyrically, my mindset had changed a bit, which is evidenced on the song When One Bests Defeat, the third song that we did on that split. Lyrically and mentally, I kind of changed. I used to be a little, back then, a little depressive, and I kind of broke out of it. And that's where the song When One Bests Defeat comes from. So I was in a really good headspace at that point. Funny little story about the first song on that record, The Bonds of Those Who Have No Understanding of Consequence. I was working at Best Buy overnight.
That's brutal.
And I absolutely hated it.
I bet.
And as I was working, like moving shelves or doing something, I had the idea for 3-1-2. 3-1-2 is the pattern of the opening chugs in that song. You know, it goes like this.
Right.
So 3-1-2 was the basis of that. And I remember working and coming up with that rhythm. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really cool. We could make a song out of that. And we just got off tour, like I was telling you, and we still play that song. It's one of our favorites to play.
But also talk about some of the ideas with some of the different sound clips that you were using. Whose idea was that?
Oh, well, you know, I think all of us really, but speaking for myself, I just loved samples. You know, from the first demo, Dave picked the sample of Beetlejuice that says it's showtime, you know. So we just love samples, you know. At the end of Hearts, Dave put This is Ripley, the last survivor of the Nostromo. So yes, using samples was already in our DNA. Our probably the biggest sample that we ever used is before My Heart on the on Hearts. You know, it's going to be cold, it's going to be gray, like that. We've kind of adopted that almost as our lyrics.
Every time I watch Groundhog Day, I just can't help but think about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I know we're trying to talk about the 10-inch, but I just saw my friend on tour, this guy named Eric Leitner, who sang. Did he sing? Was he the singer? Yeah, he sang for an emo band in South Florida called Night of Broken Glass. Does that sound familiar to you?
No. Is he related to Jordan Leitner?
Of course. Yeah, his little brother.
So he was on the cover of, not to get too far off the rails, his face was on the cover of the Bingo Mutt.
Yeah, the Meanest Man EP.
Right, Meanest Man, yeah.
Yeah, that's Jordan. But his brother and I were and still are good friends, and we were... I don't know how I can say this. Eric, if he's listening, he's probably laughing right now because he knows what I'm about to say. But we were in bed together watching Groundhog Day. As I recall, we were completely clothed, and he's, you know, married to a very nice woman. I have a very lovely girlfriend. So we weren't involved in that capacity, but we were watching Groundhog Day together, and that scene came on, and I think I hit pause, and both of us, kind of like Dave and I when we said burn, we both looked at each other and said, that's a good sample.
Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It fit so well. And there was the other one too. Trust is a tough thing to come by these days.
Yeah, that's
Whose idea was that?
That was mine. You know, people love that remake of The Thing, you know, from the early 80s. I hadn't seen it yet. I think I used that sample because I just had, probably in like 97 or 98, for the first time, had seen The Thing. And I was thinking, you know, with Trust No One, the only thing that comes to mind typically is the X-Files. And we didn't obviously want to use that because that was their big tagline. So I remember going over in my head, like, what's something that I could use with Trust? And I just watched The Thing, and I said, aha, there it is. Trust is a tough thing to come by these days. In retrospect, there's a sample at the beginning of Conan the Barbarian where the narrator at the beginning says, this you can trust. That would have been a better sample. But it's cool that we got The Thing in there.
Yeah, you did. I know you can always look back, and hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Yeah.
But the samples that were used, no matter whose idea it was, they all seemed to fit. None of them felt like they were just thrown in. They seemed to just connect to what was happening as you were listening to the music. Yeah,
no, I think we all had, you know, all of us that chose samples, probably mostly Dave and I. Yeah, all of them were pretty appropriate for where they were placed.
Yeah. Was the 10-inch with Indecision, was that the last like classic lineup Shai Hulud output, would you say? Or
Yes, it definitely was. Shortly after that, we did another split with another victim from Syracuse, and well, actually, you just had him on not too long ago. Spikey Goldbach played the drums on that.
he did.
EP.
He talked a little bit about playing. What was your memory of that?
Awesome. I love Spikey. Chris, great guy, absolutely killer drummer. You know, I was a big fan of Radio Baghdad, and you know, we had parted ways with Steve, and I just thought, man, it would be so killer if Chris Goldbach could do the drums, and he did them great. That was a fun experience. That was also at Staska's, and it was me. I guess I don't know that Chris was ever in the band, but he did that EP for us. But the only people that were really in the band at that time were myself and Matt Fletcher, who's a longtime bass player for the band. But when he joined, he was on guitar. So, we worked on the 2 covers and Set Your Body Ablaze together. And we were really the only 2 members. Then we went on tour in Europe in '99, and that's where we met Geert, who ended up being the singer on that, which was his first EP with us.
2 covers that you did though with Shai Hulud didn't surprise me based on the conversation that we've had, and maybe people that really know you wouldn't have been surprised. But when Shai Hulud covered Bad Brains and Metallica, since we had talked this entire time, you mentioned how important Bad Brains was to you early on, being that one of your earliest favorite hardcore bands, and then also how much you loved Metallica, and having covered 2 songs by both band. Covering 1 song by each band, Fearless Vampire Killers and Damage Incorporated.
Yep.
So what was that like? How did you approach the covers, since those were 2 of your personal favorite bands?
That's a really cool question, because I was at an interesting time in my guitar playing, especially when it comes to songwriting, at during the time we did the Bad Brains. So if you listen to our version of Fearless Vampire Killers, I think we did a good job, but I wanted to make it technical, and I wanted to make it like a little off time, because that's what I was kind of getting into. Probably all because of Steve. Just to go back to that briefly, like I said, Steve turned me on to writing things off time and doing things that are a little off kilter that work. So I wanted to make the Bad Brains song more like us. So I was in that mindset of how can I add this and make it a little off time. When I hear that song, Little Chad, that's the last thing that he did with us.
That's right.
Yeah, and he fucking nailed it.
Yeah.
Little Chad did a great job on that. As far as Damage Incorporated goes, that was Cliff and Alex from Undecided Records were doing a series of splits.
And that was based in Florida.
Yeah, that was in Florida. Yep. So, we got to do our split with Boy Sets Fire. I remember feeling like, wow, Shai Hulud really scored something doing a split with Boy Sets Fire. Boy Sets Fire, not so much. But why we picked Damage Incorporated? Probably because I couldn't play Battery.
That would have been your first pick, Battery.
It is my favorite Metallica song.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I hope it's interesting. When I was playing drums is when I was primarily a metalhead, and I listened to mostly metal. When I got into hardcore, I should definitely say Dr. No of the Bad Brains was my main influence of playing guitar. So my style to this day is me doing my best, not a great one, but my best Dr. No impression. Just the way he does his manic strumming. I just love it.
So we mentioned that the 10-inch was the last classic lineup with that Shai Hulud lineup. And you had eventually packed up and relocated to New York.
Yep, Poughkeepsie.
Did you get homesick at all, having been in South Florida for as long as you were?
I still get homesick.
What is it about it you miss?
I was just there. I don't know if it's appropriate to say. My mother just died. So I went to Florida. Thanks. I appreciate it. So I went to the funeral in South Florida. I just love being there. Most of my friends have moved away. Like the guy Eric that I was just talking about, that, you know, with the Groundhog Day quote. You know, I saw him in Denver. I've seen so many of my South Florida friends elsewhere in the country, but I just love it there. I have a terrible sense of direction, but in South Florida, you know, because where I lived and where the ocean was, it's like I always knew where east was. So I'm really comfortable driving there. Sample Road is just my favorite road. I get chills when I'm driving on Sample.
Wow.
Yeah, I just...
And so much it's changed, too.
Yeah, it's changed, but there's still, you know, some things are still the same. Of course, you know, the Arby's and the Taco Viva are gone. Yes. But, you remember Taco Viva?
Of course. I say taco.
Yeah, you say Viva. Also, on Sample and Military, my favorite pizza that I've ever had, it was in the plaza there with I don't even know if it's still there, Winn-Dixie, and there was an IHOP there too.
What was it called? The pizza restaurant?
The pizza place was called Big Apple Pizza.
I vaguely remember it.
It's my favorite pizza place I've ever gone to. I went to, in Pompano, there was a place called Pizza Mia that I liked. And Big Apple was where I took everybody. That was my favorite. And now that it's gone, and I'll never have that taste, that exact taste again, I've mythologized it, and now it's like the greatest pizza that I've ever had. That I haven't had that taste since.
Right.
I just love it. I don't know what they did, but I loved it. So yeah, Florida has just got so many memories. You know, I credit my friends that I grew up with and the Florida scene, again, the music scene, for getting me into the music that I got into. It's just, there's so much about Florida I love. I know people complain about the heat, and now you got Florida Man, you know, that people always talk about, but Florida is a special place for me. It's where some of the most important memories of my life happened. And yeah, I'll always love coming back to Florida, and I'll always miss it.
Yeah.
I was really upset. So were some people in South Florida, but I was really upset that we weren't able to get down there when we did our East Coast run. But we plan on fixing that.
Didn't Shai Hulud, with more of the classic earlier lineup, reunite to play a show at Churchill's? I don't remember what year that was, but does that ring any bells to you?
Yeah, I think you're talking about Real and Restless Fest. Yeah, that was, well, we had the current line, well, not current, the then current lineup of Shai Hulud, which was myself on guitar, Matt Fletcher on bass, our friend Tony on guitar, and our drummer from our album Reach Beyond the Sun, Matt Covey, on drums, and we reunited with Chad for that show, and it was great. Real and Restless Fest was an absolute blast. But yeah, I think we went to where Further Seems Forever. We or maybe they were just there with us at practice, but we did have one or two practices, and I remember some of our friends, particularly from Further Seems Forever, were there with us. So yeah, we did practice, and Chad never usually has any problems. He jumped back in and nailed it.
Was it just like getting back on the bike for him for that show?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we didn't play any songs that he didn't know. They were all songs that he sang on, all old songs that he'd done a million times. So yeah, it was like just putting on an old glove. And
Damien popped up on stage for that show too, if I'm not mistaken.
Did he? Yeah, if he did, it was probably for This Wake. Because out of all the songs that he originally wrote, we kept some of his lyrics, but This Wake is the one song that we kept all of his lyrics.
Right. What was it about his lyrics for that you thought we should keep them all?
After we recorded the demo, I just thought what Damien did on that song was so iconic. I thought it fit just so perfectly that there was no point in changing anything. And there was probably also a time factor too. I didn't have enough. I write not all of the lyrics, but I write, a decent amount. And I do remember thinking, should we try to rewrite these? Do we have the time to rewrite these? And what we do, will it be as perfect as what Damien did? Because I really think he did a great job.
Sure, that's a great song.
Yeah, so that one we left as is because, again, Damien really nailed it.
I know we didn't talk about what he was doing after he had left Shai Hulud with Morning Again, which also had that metallic hardcore kind of sound.
Yeah, even more so than us.
Did you have any thoughts on just what he did before As Friends Rust?
Yeah, well, he recorded the Morning Again demo, which turned out to be the cleanest war, I think 2 weeks before we did the Shai Hulud demo. And I remember thinking, he's in another band already? But I remember hearing that first song, Despite Your Thoughts. I was not, oh man. I just remember thinking, if Damien sounds half as good on our demo as he sounds on this song, we're golden. I love that song, particularly his vocals. He's got this, it is the sound of spite, his voice on that song.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I love it. I gotta now, as soon as I get off with you, I gotta go listen to it. I absolutely loved his vocals on that first Morning Again. And yeah, as it was a little frustrating, like, oh man, can't we keep this guy just in our band? But I was relieved when I heard the demo because I knew, wow, Damien's in like prime form here.
Yeah. And just, again, it's a new band sparked up and added more to the scene and down in South Florida.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. And you later connected with Chad one more time where he produced music from Shai Hulud. What was that like? Now it's a bit of a different
dynamic.
Yeah, totally different dynamic. What was that like?
It was awesome. We had a great time. Chad and I have been friends since he was 15. We met in like 90, probably around 95, and we did this record, I think, in 2011. So there's a lot of years between us. originally he was just going to produce the record, and we had a singer at that time, but as it turned out, it didn't work. So we were going to go into the studio, but we didn't have a singer. So Chad calls me up one day and he says, are we still recording in April? And I said, well, we'd like to, but here's the deal. We don't have a singer. Do you want to sing on it? And at first, I thought he was just going to give me a flat out no. He said, oh, man. He didn't sound excited about the idea, but then he said, let me think about it. And he called me back the next day, and I don't know if this is exactly what he said, but he said something like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. Yeah, working with him as just a singer is one thing, but working with him as a producer was a new dynamic for me, because everything that we've done has always been pretty much self-produced. But yeah, I mean, there were some serious moments. There were even disagreements. I don't want to say that they got heated, because the friendship was still at the base of everything, but yeah, there were disagreements where it was like, I feel this way, you feel that way. What are we gonna do? But ultimately, at the end of the day, Reach Beyond the Sun is my favorite Shai Hulud album. I said this on a video that we did for Metal Blade, but this is the crux of the relationship, or the crux of the dynamic. Like I said, I did with the Bad Brain song. Sometimes, I try not to anymore, but I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And Chad has made a great career out of keeping things straight and simple. So we definitely met in the middle, shook hands, and I think made a really, really good album.
But the band's still playing, still touring, of course.
Yep.
And just the wear and tear on someone, I imagine it's got to take its toll. So
yeah, absolutely. Jason Newsted was right when he said the physical toll that it takes on my body to tour with Metallica. Yeah, I don't go as crazy as I used to. I don't jump as much. I don't stomp as hard as I used to. Yeah, I'm 52 years old. I'm careful with how much and how hard I bang my head. We played a show. It was Revelations 25th anniversary, and this is still 15 years ago. But we were getting older, and Matt Fletcher did a jump. I think he tore his ACL when he landed. So I always keep that in the back of my mind. Like when I want to go crazier than I do, I'm thinking, don't tear your ACL, don't break a fucking hip, So yeah, I focus more on playing well than I do going crazy like I used to do in my youth.
Right. I can totally appreciate that, Matt.
Yeah.
But your story and all the different places you've played, people can dream of. You went to Europe. You went to Japan.
Yeah.
I believe you played Australia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we did Australia on a tour that Metallica headlined. But I will say, I genuinely never thought that anyone would really care about Shai Hulud. And I've been proven wrong quite a few times, and it's a nice thing to be proven wrong about, so what we've done, what we've accomplished, it's, I was hoping that it would be my career, that I would be, a rock star. I'm not a rock star, very, very, very far from it, but I've had a long and interesting duration with Shai Hulud, and I'm very proud of all the things we've accomplished.
And we're glad that you spent the time to come on the podcast today.
Oh, well, thanks. Again, I love your podcast. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks for taking us through the journey and from the earliest beginnings to where things are currently. Just thank you so much for coming on, and we'll get ready to close things out. And I'm going to give you the last word. Any final thoughts you'd like to share to the folks out there, both checking this episode out on YouTube, but also listening to it? The floor is yours to take us home.
Yeah, the only thing that's really worth saying is thank you. You know, people have had to put up with member changes, long times between releases, and that's frustrating if you love a band, you know. So I'm extremely grateful for everyone that has been with Hulud for any amount of time. All the floors and couches you've let us sleep on, your energy and attendance at the shows, everything that we have gotten has been given to us by the people that care. And there's, to quote Steve Kleisath's lyrical contribution to Profound Hatred of Man, words cannot express. I can't put it into words how much we appreciate the people that love our band.